So apparently you graduated the best student in the computing cohort, and you're like the first, well, the only one with the first class. How did that make you feel?
Well, great for a little bit, scared for most of the parts. I will kind of delve into why I was scared for most of the parts because it wasn't really my initial option to go into CSE, but I ended up getting that first class because of my journey, which I'll later talk about. But towards graduation, it was kind of good to be an outstanding student. Although it did put me on the spotlight, which is something I'm not kind of comfortable with, but it was really great. My parents were proud, my classmates were proud, my lecturers were very proud of that, and it was a very great experience for me. Yeah.
Would you say that the fact that there are only 2.5% black women in the STEM industry, that made you a big skeptic to actually just jump into the program, which is computer systems engineering? Was that one of the reasons, or was there anything else besides that?
Well, that's a long story that got me into computing, but just maybe to answer the question, I've never really been the kind of girl to be scared into jumping into the stuff that most women wouldn't ideally be found in. So I've always just been able to take up courses like design and technology back in junior school as one of the girls that did that for like 2 years, and then somebody else joined me. I was also the first girl to start the softball team in my junior school. So I was always looking for opportunities where I found that women weren't necessarily represented to be that example to say it's really practical to be in there. But of course, yes, there's setbacks, there's always fear of breaking ground per se. To other women, it would be really hard, considering the marginalized community that you just talked about, not having a lot of representation in the industry. But for me, it's never really been a challenge. If anything, it was a fuel for me to delve into computing. So, yeah.
Is it fair to say that it's a male-dominated industry, or it's based off capabilities, your own capabilities as an individual, or whatever you may deem it? Is it fair to say that it
Yeah,
is a male-dominated industry?
it is. It's very fair. The numbers don't lie. You just gave a percentage. And even with countries that we feel that are doing quite well with having that representation, when it comes to the industry itself, getting into the workspace, it's so hard to see women holding leadership positions, even though you'd find that an organization would typically say, oh, we've got 50% representation of both male and female. But when you actually look at the numbers of women being able to make decisions in the workspace, it doesn't really reflect on that, on the number of having 50-50.
Right. So you kind of dominated in the male-dominated industry. By being number one, would you say that that was your biggest achievement?
Yeah, it was the beginning of greater things, I'd say. Initially, I wanted to go into psychology, and for some very weird reason that I can't even explain to myself, when I was doing my senior high school from 5, I just discovered that I wasn't really into sciences and everything that I was pretty much good at excelling at. So I kind of found myself, and I really enjoyed languages, geography, things that were really out of the ordinary for me at the time. And it meant that towards the final exams, I didn't do great as per standard. Like I was a straight A student just since primary school and stuff. So I ended up with 44 points, and most people had passed during that year. And I couldn't make it into psychology because I was 2 points short. So coming to BAC, as my mom didn't really want me staying back home. It's like, you have to get something, you have to do something. And then I applied for AAT originally because I was really good at methods and sciences. But just when I was about to pay my fees, like the fees that you pay up to hold your spot, essentially, to be in the course. I overheard a conversation between a young guy who had already been in the school for quite some time, and he was advising maybe a sister or a cousin, I really don't know, but it was a young girl who was trying to go into CSE, and he said that there's this trend where women don't do well in the school. You can't even get to second year. There's something called Java. At the time, I didn't even know what that was.
Some sort of language now.
Yeah, programming language. It's like this Java that people are really, women can seem to be good at, and they really not doing good at this course. So me being that child who's always, again, jumping into those terrains where women are not represented, I just went back to the registry office and it's like, you know what, I'd like to sign up for CSE. And then there was Tepo by the time. I don't know if she's still in the school, but yeah, she helped me out, looked at my results. I did qualify for the course. And then, long story short, I found myself in CSE. And from the get-go, I was just trying to figure out what this Java is, any programming languages, and just really set an example to prove the guy that I even today don't know who it was, but it just really drove me to say, there's no way you're going to stand here and speak like that about women. I'm going to be that woman that proves you wrong about this. And yeah, I guess my determination from the get-go helped me then graduate as the only first class. I was the best programmer in school as well. And I actually got a job before I even graduated. So,
I heard about that.
Yeah,
I was told that you used to get paid a little bit more than most people in the country.
I wouldn't say paid a little bit more, but
you bought a car.
At some point I did. I got exposed to so much because then when you come with that determination, then your supervisor or your boss or the director, whoever, gives you responsibility. So I was that employee that would be taken to meetings where typically directors would like make decisions, do we get the business or not? And just even if I wouldn't say a lot, I'd just listen in, learn the negotiation skills, advice where I could, especially on like timelines, because usually people just be like, oh, we'll be able to produce this product in such and such a time, try to please the clients. And sometimes it doesn't work out like that because it's a lot of work. So I'd be that person say, yeah, it really wouldn't work that way. So yeah, I got really blessed in that part that I was very proactive, and then it made me to be a very trustworthy employee and get to be exposed to so many things that most of my colleagues wouldn't.
Let me just pick on the day that you got that women not excel within this particular program. How would you describe yourself? Would you describe yourself as a go-getter or dare to dreamer? Or you just don't take a challenge lightly? You would want to prove the other person wrong. And that also speaks to what you're doing now in terms of like trying to inspire and capacitate women to jump into the space of STEM. How would you describe yourself in that particular aspect?
I wouldn't really say go-getter. I'd say I'm a courageous person, and maybe just from a dictionary explanation of that, it just means showing up authentically as you are, despite whatever the outcome is, whether it's success or rejection, you still show up at the end of the day. So I'm that kind of person to say, my mantra on a daily basis is feel the fear and do it anyway. So I will go there with the shaking voice, shaking hands, be the youngest in the room, maybe not the most smartest, but if I believe that I belong in a room and I need to contribute somehow, I would still approach those forbidden places and tables. So I'd say I'm a courageous person who's not afraid to fail. And I'm very impact driven. So I always want to know why I'm doing something, where is it going to get me, and most importantly, how it's benefiting the community as well as young girls that, like I said, as I took up the course in BAC, that was just a seed being planted for greater things, which is just set an example, help women bridge from school into, the working space, and just show them that it's possible to do it. Yeah.
Should I tell you what the producers wanted to describe you? Use this description about you. They describe you as a trailblazer,
Okay,
a determined visionary, and a dynamic force in the field.
great.
3 ticks, or you want to differ with any of those?
That's that's something about branding yourself that I really like. It's something that I also bring up to my young mentees, that you should always align with what you want people to think about you and how you want to impact community. So I very much align with being a visionary. It's just that I am a very reserved person, and I'm not quite extroverted. So I don't use very loud tactics. For instance, I would prefer to explain myself as a quiet leader, very empathic, very calm. But it does not then take away those 3 words that you've used, because at the end of the day, that's the impact and outcome of what I do, despite my tactics.
Well, there you have it. Miss Angela Matlapeng, ladies and gents, and she is graduated BAc with a BSc honors in computer systems engineering. We're going to be having a conversation with her throughout this particular podcast. And she's going to be telling us all about her academic journey, what she's up to currently. And so it's going to be an exciting conversation altogether. Welcome to Pod BAC. This is where we have a conversation with trailblazing and determined visionaries, alumni in Botswana County College as Angela Matlapeng. So stay tuned, it's going to be exciting. All right, welcome back to Pot BAC. And right now I've got Angela Matlapeng, who is a BAC alumni. You're not only an alumni, you're also the president of the Alumni Association as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was appointed about a year ago, and that was really brief before I had to go study for my master's in Ireland. So I was responsible for the initial, getting signatories to get the association registered, to really come up with a charter that would then guide us as to how the association is supposed to run. And then I also led a few sessions on just going through our basic objectives, mission, what we want to get done as an association, and basically laying foundation for the strategy for the period that would be running. But yeah, it's been a great journey for me, even though it was kind of brief, and I'm quite happy that I'm back now to continue stuff where I left off.
You seem to have so much love for Botswana County College. So if you were to describe it as a car, what car would it be? This is not my question, by the way. It's a producer. I don't know why they would ask you about a car. Are you into cars? But anyway, how would you describe it as a car?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. I would say BAC is it's a Maybach. No, Maybach, to be specific, an S680. It's a really classy, luxurious car, and it would be black in color, very bold, but it would have the mechanics of a Toyota Land Cruiser, which is very adaptable, and it's resilient and reliant. You could pretty much throw it anywhere and it still, give out the results that you wish for. And I say that because BAC is identified with prestige, excellence. Just the name BAC puts you out there as a graduate. Career-wise, people expect leadership from you. People expect you to be really good at your skill. We're also trained on the soft skills part of it, which now also referred to core skills. So coming from business school, you have that boldness about you because already the school itself has this reputation. It's not just in the country, it's also in the region. And the fact that it's affiliated with 3 or more universities, international universities that are viewed as also excelling, then it also adds to that weight to say this is a very credible institution. I love that we've got an ICT industry skill as well for those that are trying to add on to the degrees or diplomas and stuff like that, just to augment what they already have to sort of meet industry standard. And the fact that I said it's got that resilient body of the Land Cruiser, adaptable, it's that BAC is always consistently catching up with innovation, leading in innovation, also getting into industry partnerships to make sure that the skills that students end up graduating with are relevant. So yeah.
Just try to create that industry relevance within the students. Well, that's a very. I think we should make you an ambassador one way or the other. We should try to have the conversation, right? Before BAC, let me take you back now. Just let's talk about your academic journey from as far as you can remember. I don't know, crash, you guys called reception, whatever it was. Just as far as it goes, just take us through that. Were you a top student, always a top student, or was there some naughtiness in some way,
Yeah, I can vividly remember as back as, crash, as you said. I went to Hulala. It was a very great school, and I really liked it because my one of my teachers, her name was Miss March. She had a really nice, cute white dog. And apparently that's the thing that got me out of bed. It's like I need to pet the dog before I get to class. And I guess that's how I discovered that I really love animals. But I was pretty much a normal kid, coloring outside the lines, as one would expect. But going onwards from primary school to senior school, I went to government schools, and I was always top three of my class. And I've had so many prizes, especially around maths, science. And I did mention that I was the only student that at the time took design and technology, which was really forbidden. Like, you wouldn't find a lot of women doing that kind of course. You'd probably find them in business or like home economics courses. But for me, as the only girl, I was also getting prizes for design and technology. So it was
still
quite,
within a male-dominated
yes,
space.
quite
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. And this was when I was really young, a teenager, and not really knowing about these discrepancies that, like, oh, there's this thing for boys and this thing for girls. I'm just like, if I enjoy doing it, I'm just going to jump into it. And I did go to senior school, same thing. I was still a top achiever. And in fact, my mentorship journey starts when I was very young. I did tutor some students as well. I enjoyed sports a lot. So I did a lot of athletics. As short as I am, and I used to be very short back then, I was so good at high jump. I don't know how.
Okay.
And I can't explain it.
I can't comment on that one.
Yeah. So I did get to regionals through high jump. I did shot put as well. I did mention track, yes. I played volleyball, soccer, baseball, which I started. And yeah, I've really always been that kid who wanted to get into things. And there was one other thing that I was also only female participant in that, and that was the school gymnastics team when I was like 14 or something. So it was a trend of mine to, set precedents, do well in school, which really, for some reason, put me under pressure, especially from my parents' side. They always expected greatness out of me. They always had very little room for my failure. So sometimes you just have to be studying, and it doesn't give you that social life, which I kind of looked back and said, I think I really needed to be more social, have more friends and stuff like that. But apart from that, I've always been that learner who's just academically doing well.
So being a top achiever and dominating in what they call male-dominated spaces, there had to be some challenges. What were your challenges in those particular spaces? I mean, talking about in school as well as in your career now, what are the major challenges that you're facing as a top achiever?
It always takes me back to unhealthy competition. So there's a thing that male counterparts do when females show up in a way that they don't expect to show up, which is something that I think could be addressed by not only having programs for women, but also having the space to perhaps reprogram young boys to say this is how you accommodate someone who's a female and they're doing stuff that you wouldn't traditionally or culturally think that they would be into. So I have, especially in the workplace, faced challenges where there's just unhealthy competition from my male counterparts, and it also brings out a side of imposter syndrome because we always have to overcompensate our skills and over communicate, overdo pretty much everything to be given that respect that your male counterpart would ideally just get from existing or being in the room, right? There was some research that proved that most male, it was done actually in the country, would apply for jobs when they have 40% of the skills listed for the role, whereas women would wait for 90% or even 100 to say, I need to check out all these skills before I apply for a job. And having that confidence to affect that someone could actually get a job not having 60% of the roles shows just how conducive the environment would be for the male versus the women in the workspace. And I would say also not having a lot of female representation is so hard for young women to like see yourself being in that position, say I aspire to be like maybe executive director so and so, they're in the ICT industry, so I'd like to do that. During my time when I started my career, there weren't a lot of female stories that were told about women in ICT, and I really found myself struggling to like belong in the space and just continue my trailblazing trait. So it's kind of challenging when you see yourself as odd or ordinary, and the fact that you have to just prove yourself consistently and constantly say, I'm as good as the next person. Yeah.
So how do you overcome such? Just one or two things that you do to try to overcome maybe your imposter syndrome. And well, I'm not saying you do have it. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm just simply saying, how do you overcome some of these challenges, like the unhealthy competition, the constant battles or trying to convince yourself that you are actually at the top and you don't need to work twice as hard?
So I've always just been that person to like look within. What do I want to do? How do I want to get to it? What are the resources that are available for me to get there? Yes, there would be competition, but it's not really something that I focus on. So when I started working, for instance, I'd be the first one to come to work, maybe the last one to leave as well. Just make sure that I get the skill, because one thing that would make it so easy for people to kind of sideline you is when they immediately realize that you don't have the skill that would then give you merit, right? And to have those solutions where women are represented quite well in the industry, it means you need to combine both merit and also inclusion, or I would say, yeah, diversity, inclusion, and any form of activity that would include women in the space. So what I would normally do is just concentrate on what I need to do, where I want to go, and get mentorship. I've always had mentorship up until a point where I was a mentor as well, and just not being afraid of telling my story, because I always remind myself, where do I come from? Why did I get into the industry? What does it mean for the next girl who won't benefit from my silence? So I always make it a point to speak up when I see any form of behavior that mistreats women in the place, or any form of awareness that I could, pass to my male counterparts, because to be honest, some of these things would be done without them even realizing that it's stuff that affects us. So you need to be that person who says, listen, if you're speaking to me this way, it might come off of as office harassment, for instance, and just continue to be that person who sheds the light that is necessary to make the environment conducive for everyone. Yeah.
Let's talk about this. You spent, was it the last 2 years or last year abroad studying for your master's and advancing your education. Before you tell us about your time that side, tell me about the difference between inclusivity this side and that side in terms of women. Are they more appreciated that side than this side? Or what's the issue?
Yeah.
Or it's just a blanket issue across?
It is a blanket issue across in terms of numbers. Globally, the numbers still paint the same picture.
Yeah, I mean, right now, 1.9% of black women are leading in the tech industry. That's 1.9%. That's, like you said, the numbers do speak.
Yeah, and the only difference or the key difference that I would rather say I've seen is that a couple of policies that protect women, that ensure that organizations are transparent in, for instance, the hiring policies or, principles. There are also deliberate quotas that organizations have to reach to say, if you've got this certain percentage of women, then we give you funding. It gets to that point where if you don't have diversity, it means you're losing out as a business. So I would say in developing countries, it's a little bit more intentional to say we need these women in the space, we need diverse solutions, and the only way to have diverse solutions, inclusive products, is to have women also being at the table. But of course, if you really read deep and in between the lines, you'd see that most people would be checking boxes to say, okay, I've got 50% women, yeah, that's it. But the glass ceiling challenge still stands, where we've got women representation, but they're just not getting anywhere in terms of really leading and taking decisions in those different organizations.
What would you change about such a situation, such issues, and such challenges that women face? What would you change?
The quick thing that comes to my mind is, even though I personally am not a mother, but I've seen that it's kind of difficult for women who also play a very crucial role of being mothers in the community come back to the workplace, right? So if you go for confinement, say 3 months or whatever time you take, it means your male counterpart is still working, they're getting more skills and all those things. So if there's intentional training for women who go on confinement or just go for their motherly duties, if there's a way to help you catch up, if I may put it that way, if the environment is conducive, like for instance, in developed countries, you'd find that there's a nursery in the school. If you're breastfeeding, you could just like take whatever minutes, step aside, go breastfeed your kid. I think if we could be very inclusive and intentional about accommodating women as mothers, that would be very helpful. Having flexible working hours, for instance, I know that happened during COVID, where everyone was working from home, and it really helped a lot of women catch up with their kids, even though they still had to, work and be in meetings while still prepping for their kids. But just having that flexible time to say, well, at 3 or whatever time you can knock off, go get your kids from school, or just be there for your kids, it would go a great mile to help women not feel like they have to choose between career and being a parent.
And let's bring it, narrow it down a bit towards your industry, which is the STEM industry. In Botswana, what policies or what do you think the leadership could do to try to be much more or increase representation of women within the STEM industry and empower their leadership within this particular STEM industries as well, in Botswana specifically?
Yeah, we need equity policies. I don't think as a country we have one to just lay that foundation and say as organizations, make sure that women, not even just women, just marginalized communities in general are treated equally. And it's so unfortunate that most organizations would say we hire on merit or on excellence when the foundation or the playing ground is not set level. It just means that there's already someone at an advantage. Things like unconscious bias don't really come up in hiring groups. So if you're going to sit as part of a panel and you're trying to, interview someone, if success to you looks like a man, that you're probably going to hire a man, or someone who's you think is capable would be someone that closely represents yourself or whatever that you see within your organization. So up until we have these conversations about what unconscious bias looks like, what kind of stereotypes and bias are we looking at, it's really unfair to say that you hire on merit when the playing field is not balanced like that. And I feel like we need to tell more stories about women who have, set these trails. One other challenge that I didn't mention earlier on about being in a male-dominated space is that you tend to have male counterparts, taking over credit. So would work in a team, I do something and they'd be like, oh, he did it, because they expect him to do it. And some women wouldn't have that confidence to say, no, yes, it was team effort, but I was responsible for ABC that counted towards success. And if we don't hear more stories about women who've been successful, we'll always think that they're not really in the space, they're not really contributing anything. I mean, right now, in politics, we've only got 3 women in cabinet right now. It's not really my space, and I can't say much into what the barriers are in terms of politics. But to think a whole cabinet would just have 3 women is something that I don't think I would be comfortable as a woman saying, yes, we're working towards change, and just not see representation.
Yeah. Let's speak about stories. We're going to talk about your story. We're just having a conversation about your story now. We're going to have a conversation towards your job and what it entails in a bit. But we're going to take a quick break. Then we'll have a conversation about that. There you have it, Angela Matlapeng talking about the challenges that women face across all industries, not just in the STEM. And her suggestions as well to say, look, it starts from the interview itself, right? We need to just eliminate that unconscious biases that we may be having in the interview panel, right? Yeah, so we just need to take it. So there you have it. That's the conversation we're having right now. Want to take a quick break, and then we're going to jump straight into the conversation about her job to hear more about her story as a woman of success in the STEM industry. Okay, welcome back to Pod BAC. We're having Angela Matlapeng here having a conversation about her journey as being the best student in the computer systems engineering class and be the only one with the first class in that particular cohort for that particular year. We're going to jump into having a conversation about her journey and, well, her current job and what it entails. So, Angela, what do you do now? You graduated your master's. What are you doing now?
Yeah. So I work as a lead analyst in something called the Computer Security Incident Response Team, or CSRIT for short. And basically the mandate is consumer protection against online threats and anything cybersecurity related, really. I do a lot of awareness and capacity building, both in the private and public sector. Incident response. So ideally, critical infrastructure gets an incident, they report it to us, and then we help them basically take care of the problem. I do a little bit of vulnerability management as well, threat intelligence, just to give an idea of what's going on in the infrastructure in terms of threats and how the organizations can mitigate against that. Yeah, so that's my role.
I also hear that you do a lot of stuff for the community as well.
Yes, I do.
Let's have a conversation around that. What do you do exactly,
Yeah.
and why do you do what you're doing?
So going back to my story as to how I got into CSE, in 2019 I partnered with BAC to essentially come up with an award that would recognize women doing great in computing courses. So this was the Angela Matlapeng Women in ICT Award. It ran for 5 years, and the goal there was not to only, acknowledge and recognize these women doing well, but to also bring awareness around issues that we've just had a deep conversation about. Encourage young women and young girls rather to take up these courses, to essentially say there've been girls and women that have excelled at this, and you can also be part of that journey. And it wasn't just giving the award away. I also took under my wing these recipients in terms of mentorship. So just having realized how difficult it was of a journey for me to go from graduating into the industry itself, you need someone to really handhold you in terms of how you need to behave. For instance, I did mention branding. How do you stand out as a brand? How do you stand out as an employee to say, this is what I stand for, this is where I want to go, and this is how I present? So we've done a couple of another initiative that I came up with, which is called Learning Lunches, where I just basically set them up with other women in organizations where these women are leading ICT roles. So we've had two actually with APSA, we've had one with Masscom. I also engaged another lady who's really doing well in the sustainability industry. Her name is Shamil Akhosi. So they would ideally sit down with these women, have a very relaxed conversation, share stories and insights to say, how do you navigate this industry? Because it's not just misrepresentation in school, it also goes to the industry as well. So we'd just have those conversations over lunch, very relaxed, and it would mean that they get to network with other ladies as well. They get to have access to resources, say, well, speaking to the MD, how have you navigated your space to a point where you ended up being an MD? What can I do to, aspire and pretty much follow the same journey that you've had? And what happens is that now when the women get mentored, they also mentor the other women. So they've got also the projects that they tend to help other students, for instance. And I think it's been really impactful because it's just not these 13 women that are doing this. They're also extending the same mentorship, the same help to other young girls as well. Because when I was really graduating, I didn't have that person to look up to and say, how do I do this? What are the do's and don'ts in the industry? And being there for a while, I get to tell them, well, if this is the kind of pushback you're getting, this is what you can do to just, maintain your status in that industry, or rather change the status quo if that's what you need to do. So, yeah.
You're basically practicing what you preach, in terms of trying to tell the stories of women in ICT to younger women, show them that it's actually working, and there is really some hope at the end of the tunnel, some light there. So kudos to you on that one. Well done on that particular aspect. Quick question: is it working?
Oh, yeah. I would say it's working from a confidence perspective. The young women that I have been mentoring do have that confidence about them to say, you know what, I'm going to speak up. Doesn't matter if I'm going to be listened to. It doesn't matter how long it takes for change to happen, but I'll be that person who just says, this shouldn't be done or this should be done. And I would say that I love the fact that they're also taking on their own small projects to say, I also want to, be that person that you were to me to the next girl, which is something that I was really looking forward. In fact, after we had our couple of meetings with UPS as well, we saw that the MD also ended up having her own award for women, a mentorship actually for more women in the industry. So I would say it's been something that I thought was really small and very nuclear towards these women, but it's spreading, it's growing. We see that people are having so many conversations around these issues. We had, I actually worked with BAC, I can't remember the year, but it's a couple of years back where we had our first Girls in ICT workshop, I would call it that. And it was online because it was during the COVID season. And we had all other institutions coming in to have this conversation and say, how do we support girl children as lecturers from whatever institution? And there was so many people that took part in that conversation because it was really overdue to like have these conversations, say, how do we come together and make sure that the industry is conducive. And we've seen that BAC has been on a yearly basis celebrating girls in ICT, going out to primary schools, senior schools, and having industry partners come and say this is the kind of skills that we look for, and we can even teach you how to code, for instance. As a young kid, they usually come here to exhibit the kind of products that they have, and this is really inspiring to young girls to say, oh, this is not really as scary as I thought it was, and I do have a place in ICT. So I think there has been a ripple effect that I really didn't think would be there, but it makes me very happy that I'm seeing so many changes around this.
All right, and part and parcel of you being the BAC Alumni Association chairperson allows you to sit on the BAC board. Would you say that you do relay some of these conversations on the board and try to advise? And what is your vision beyond girls celebrating girls in ICT for the BAC community as it stands, more than just what you've done?
Yeah, so I did mention that I went to go study, so I haven't really had a chance to sit on the board, but I have sat on a couple of boards before in terms of my work. So before I went into cybersecurity, I managed the domain space or the .bw for the country, and I ended up being part of the Africa top level domain names, which is basically a space for managers across Africa who deal with the same issues around domain names. And being the vice chairperson of that board gave me that liberty to bring up issues such as how do we involve women in the domain name space, because it's also an area where not a lot of women are in. And I had to also speak on behalf of the AFTLD at organizations, big organizations such as the ICANN, which is really an organization that takes care of the global internet. So having the space and the forum to say we need more women to be in this kind of space was really helpful for me, because then I got to feel that I'm not the only person in the space doing this. I could also get more women to, be part of the space. So in a similar manner, I don't think I would stop talking about this because it's a really important topic to me. It means a lot. I think I will be bringing these issues to the BAC board as I'll be coming back to the board, and just I would say student welfare in general. There's so much that goes, like so much nuance that's not captured around being a successful student, which speaks to student welfare. What else is the school doing to enable or make sure that the student is well-rounded? They're not just academically successful, but they also have good mental health, for instance. So these are the issues that I think I'd be considering.
Besides these two boards that you sit in, any other boards that you may be sitting in that you feel like you can be more influential, and any future boards that you dream of sitting in that you may feel like you may be much more influential in these conversations?
Yeah, I also advocate a lot for digital inclusion. Like just having internet that helps everyone, whether you're a person living with disability, whether you're a young girl, a mom, all those things. So I do volunteer in a lot of working groups that are virtual, and most of them have been started outside the country, and think I've done a really good job of establishing myself way beyond the borders of my country. So I do sit in one of the working groups around accessibility, and I have been, you know, pretty much involved in awareness that speaks to that. Like, for instance, how do you have your website set up for someone who can't see or someone who can't hear? How do you make sure that your podcast, for instance, would be more accessible to them? And I also take part in what you call DNS abuse, or domain name space abuse. It simply means that the country is at there's risk of what you would call phishing or business email compromise. So just making sure that organizations that are responsible for domain names make sure that they're not involved in any scams, for instance, or any malware, you'd say a virus. So anything that would disrupt internet from being what it really needs to be, which is a digital space that helps everyone to be better. So I contribute to these working groups in terms of writing articles, speaking at conferences, pretty much helping out with training and capacity building. I actually got an award for outstanding and innovative leader when I was in the AFTLD. So during the 10th anniversary, I received that award, which has really proven to me that beyond Botswana, I still need to put in the work that would also reflect back in the country and say we're involved, because in my space there's so many organizations where decisions are taken, and we often find that there's not so many voices to say this is really what we would want policies to look like. And so that's where I come in. I do a lot of stakeholder engagement where I just get feedback from industry partners and say, what do you think an inclusive internet would look like? What do you need as a vulnerable person? What can we do in terms of policies to make sure that you're included? So, yeah.
You're doing a lot. Don't you ever get tired of?
Yeah. There's definitely burnout, which it's very important that organizations do have activities that are more relaxing outside work, and I'm very lucky that we have that at my current employer, which is BOCRA. We do a lot of team work building, a lot of fun stuff really outside the office, but I also take the time to just go into routine. Like in the morning, I just give myself that 1 hour that I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna meditate, I'm gonna read something inspirational, I'm gonna exercise, and I know that for sure during the day I've given myself time that I need. And yeah, I tend to relax as well. I love nature, I do love sports. I'm actually setting up a fencing club here in Botswana.
Fencing club?
Yeah, it's something that I took back in Ireland. So I am looking forward to engaging with whoever wants to have fun in that space.
I'm trying to picture the fencing club in I'm trying to imagine, yeah. All right, so look, apparently it's a great sport.
Oh yeah, it's great. Apart from when
What's the objective of that?
you get your knee broken, which is what happened to me. But fencing is a game of strategy, which is really why I loved it, because it's about when things don't work out, which is if someone is attacking you, how do you respond? They call it riposte. How do you respond? Do you just attack out of the ordinary, or do you really calculate your steps, say, okay, this is what's going to happen, I'm going to wait, see how the play out goes, and then attack? Or am I going to be the person who charges, don't give the opponent time to attack? So it's really strategy based, and it's all about being accurate. Two of the weapons in fencing requires accuracy of your arm. So if the tip doesn't touch and go off, then it's not a point. So you really need to be reaching the target, which is basically what people do, put in strategies, KPIs, reach your target. So I kind of translated into my everyday work to say, if things aren't working out, how do I observe the situation and pretty much repost it or reply.
On a lighter note, what's your
Yeah.
biggest fear?
I used to have a fear of being perceived, which I had to work on a lot. And now I don't really, I wouldn't say I give in to fear. Like I did say, my mantra is just feel the fear and do it anyway. I realized that fear is as an important emotion as any other feeling or emotion, and I get to like sit with my fear. It's an emotion. If it goes up, it eventually comes down. I'm also a believer, so I always pray before I do anything. The Bible does say that God has given us the spirit of not fear, but of power and of a sound and clear mind and of love. So I try to just really do everything that I engage myself in love as the root of everything. And eventually, even if I do get scared or feel hesitant of doing things, I always ask myself a question of what would be the repercussion of staying silent or not doing the things that I seemingly fear to do. So, yeah, I just pray, sit with the emotion until it comes down, acknowledge that it's happening, and move on. Just be courageous.
It makes sense about everything that you're doing. The fact that that's how you overcome your fear. Like that's quite well. Well, let's finish off the conversation here. I'm going to just give you a rhetorical title on a newspaper. Enzala Matlapeng has been appointed the CEO of. Finish off the organization.
Oh, wow. That would be interesting. I don't know.
Which organization would you go for?
Not even organization, but my view is I'll probably have my own organization at the point. I just haven't thought of names. But yeah, I just remember that I didn't really go into details with what I studied abroad, but my master's was in business analytics. And my whole objective was to just approach ICT from a holistic manner, like this risk coming from the cybersecurity background, but there's also data and there's also AI and machine learning, all these buzzwords where most organizations are now relying on big data to make decisions. And I see myself maybe going into a consulting role just to understand customer relations management, how data works, its life cycle, how it really translates to business decisions, and then end up just having my own firm to transform businesses for the better.
So you mean to tell me that if you're offered a role of a CEO for any organization, would you wouldn't take it?
Right now, it's not something I'm thinking about, but I did mention that I'm a quiet leader. It doesn't take a title to see me being a leader. I will always just do what I can to point things in the right direction in terms of vision and where I want things to get to.
Wow. Angela, thank you so much for being part of the show. Great conversation, man. It was very interesting, exciting. Well, there you have it, Angela Matlapeng. Thank you so much for tuning in. Till next time.